Close the door and never come back.
The sound of my wife's phone buzzing at 2:47 a.m. told me everything I needed to know. She'd been getting texts all week at odd hours, but this was different. The phone was charging in the kitchen, and Tessa was dead asleep beside me, her breathing deep and steady. I slipped out of bed and walked barefoot across the cold hardwood. The message preview lit up the screen. Can't stop thinking about earlier. Your husband's still clueless? I stood there in my boxers staring at those words until they burned into my retinas. 23 years of marriage, 3 combat tours in Iraq, building a business from nothing with these hands. And this is how it ends, with a text message at 2:47 a.m. I set the phone back exactly where I found it and returned to bed. Tessa hadn't moved. I lay there listening to her breathe, planning my next move like it was a military operation. Because that's what this was now, war. My name is Nate Carver, and I'm about to destroy 4 lives, including my own. 6 months earlier, things looked different. My renovation company, Carver Construction, was finally gaining traction in Portland's booming housing market. 27 years old, fresh out of the Marines, I'd started the business with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox my father left me. Now I had 12 employees and was bidding on a city contract worth $2 million. The morning everything changed started like any other. I was reviewing blueprints for the downtown redevelopment project when Dean Patterson walked into my office. Dean was my project manager, cocky, ambitious, and 3 years younger than me. He had that college boy swagger that came from never having dirt under his fingernails. "Nate, we need to talk about the Henderson Street job," Dean said, dropping into the chair across from my desk. He was wearing a pressed button-down that probably cost more than my work boots. "What about it?" "The permits are delayed. City inspector wants another environmental impact study." I set down the blueprints and looked at him. "That's the 3rd delay this month. You sure you're handling this right?" Dean's jaw tightened. "I'm handling it fine. Maybe if you trusted your team more, we'd move faster." That was Dean, always pushing boundaries, always testing how far he could go. I'd hired him because he was smart and hungry, but lately, his hunger seemed directed at more than just success. "I trust results," I said. "Get me those permits by Friday." After Dean left, I walked out to the construction site behind our office. The smell of concrete and sawdust always cleared my head. My business partner, Reed Hoffman, was there talking to our subcontractor, Marco Delacroix. Reed was the money guy, smooth, connected, always wearing suits that cost more than some people's rent. Marco was the opposite, tattooed, rough around the edges, but the best concrete finisher in the city. "Nate," Reed called out, waving me over. We were just discussing the timeline for the apartment complex. Reed had put up half the capital when I expanded the business 2 years ago. He didn't get his hands dirty, but he knew how to work the system. Marco, on the other hand, had started as a day laborer and worked his way up through pure skill. "Timeline's solid," Marco said, not looking up from the forms he was checking. "Long as the city doesn't jerk us around again." "That's what I pay Dean to handle," I said. Reed laughed. "Dean's good with the bureaucrats. Kid's got charm." I watched Reed's expression when he mentioned Dean. Something flickered there. Amusement, maybe. Or conspiracy. "Speaking of charm," Reed continued, "Tessa stopped by earlier, looking for you." "She did?" "Yeah, around lunch. Said she'd catch up with you at home." Reed's smile was too wide. Lucky man having a wife who checks up on you. I'd been married to Tessa for 5 years. We'd met at a veterans benefit dinner where she was volunteering. She was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made men stupid. Long dark hair, green eyes, and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. She'd been working as a real estate agent then, struggling to make ends meet. I thought I was rescuing her. That evening, I came home to find Tessa in the kitchen cooking dinner. She was wearing a sundress that showed off her legs and humming some song I didn't recognize. "Hey, baby," she said, turning to kiss my cheek. "How was work?" "Good." "Reed said you stopped by?" "Oh, that. I was in the neighborhood showing a property. Thought I'd surprise you for lunch, but you were out." I opened a beer and leaned against the counter. "What property?" "The Davidson place on Elm Street." "You know, the colonial with the big yard." I nodded, though something felt off. The Davidson place had been sold 3 weeks ago. I knew because Marco had done the concrete work for their new driveway. Did you sell it? Still working on it, Tessa said quickly. These things take time. She turned back to the stove, and I noticed her phone on the counter. The screen lit up with a text notification. She grabbed it faster than necessary. Who was that? Just work stuff. You know how clients are. But I'd seen the sender's name, Dean. That night, after Tessa fell asleep, I stood in my garage looking at the tools hanging on the pegboard. Each one had a purpose, a specific job to do. My father had taught me that when I was 12. Right tool for the right job, son. Try to use a screwdriver as a hammer, and you'll end up with a broken handle and a bent screw. I was starting to understand that marriage worked the same way. The next morning, I decided to test my theory. I told Tessa I'd be working late, then drove to the Davidson place. The house was dark, sold signs still in the yard from 3 weeks ago. I parked across the street and waited. At 6:30 p.m., a silver BMW pulled into the driveway. Reed's BMW. A minute later, Tessa's Honda Civic appeared around the corner. They met at the front door like they'd done this before. I sat in my truck for 2 hours, watching the shadows move behind the curtains. When they finally came out, Reed kissed my wife goodbye on the front porch. Not a friendly peck. A real kiss, the kind that said they knew each other's bodies. I drove home and pretended to be asleep when Tessa got back at 9:15. How was your day? She asked, slipping into bed. Long, I said. Yours? Boring, just paperwork. I rolled over and looked at her in the darkness. Tessa? Yeah? I love you. She smiled and kissed my forehead. I love you too, baby. The lie came so easily to her. That's when I knew this wasn't just about closeness. This was about something deeper, something that would require the right tools to fix. Over the next week, I started paying attention to details I'd been ignoring. The way Dean's eyes followed Tessa when she visited the office. How Reed always seemed to know when she'd be around. The new lingerie in our laundry that I'd never seen her wear for me. And then there was Marco. I discovered that connection by accident. I'd forgotten some paperwork at the office and drove back after dinner. Marco's truck was in the parking lot, which was weird because he never worked nights. I parked quietly and walked around to the back entrance. Through the window, I could see into the small apartment above our office that we used for storage. Marco was there, shirtless, his tattoos visible in the lamplight. And so was Tessa, wearing nothing but one of his work shirts. I stood there watching my wife with another man and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just an affair. This was a pattern. Dean, Reed, Marco. She was working her way through my entire inner circle. I walked back to my truck and drove home. Tessa's car was already in the driveway. Hey, she said when I walked in. I thought you were working late. Finished early. Where have you been? Shopping with Sarah. Got some groceries. I looked at the kitchen counter. No grocery bags, no receipts. Just Tessa in the same clothes she'd been wearing when I left, smelling like concrete dust and another man's cologne. I'm tired, I said. Going to bed. Nate, wait! She grabbed my arm. Is everything okay? You've been distant lately. I looked down at her hand on my arm, at the wedding ring I'd saved 3 months of Marine pay to buy. Everything's fine. Just work stress? Maybe we should take a vacation. Get away from all this. Yeah, I said, maybe we should. But I wasn't thinking about vacation. I was thinking about the small digital recorder in my toolbox, the one I used to document client meetings. I was thinking about the security camera system I'd installed at the office 6 months ago. I was thinking about the fact that Tessa had never changed her password on our shared cloud storage. I was thinking about tools and how to use them properly. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Tessa, instead of beating the heck out of 3 men who'd betrayed me, I decided to build something. A plan as solid and permanent as the concrete foundations I poured for a living. I started with reconnaissance. Every good military operation begins with intelligence gathering. I installed a small GPS tracker on Tessa's car, the kind parents use to monitor teenage drivers. I set up alerts on our shared credit card accounts. I began documenting everything: times, places, photographs, receipts. The pattern became clear within days. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Tessa met Reed at various hotels around the city. Wednesdays, she visited Marco at his apartment. Fridays, she had lunch with Dean at restaurants where they thought they wouldn't be seen. She was systematic about it, almost professional. Each man offered something different. Reed provided financial excitement, expensive dinners, shopping trips, the promise of a lifestyle my contractor's salary couldn't match. Marco was pure physical attraction, young, dangerous, forbidden. Dean was the emotional connection, someone who understood her ambitions, who spoke her language of networking and social climbing. I was the foundation she stood on while she reached for something better. The recording device proved more useful than I'd expected. Tessa always left her purse in the kitchen when she came home, and modern phones pick up sound even when they're locked. I began to collect fragments of conversations, enough to piece together the full scope of her betrayal. Told him I was showing the Morrison property. Thinks we're just business partners. Never suspects anything, too busy with his little construction company. After the city contract comes through, we can figure out what to do. About Nate, that last one stopped me cold. They weren't just having affairs. They were planning something that involved my business, my future, my life's work. I made a copy of everything and stored it in a safety deposit box across town. Then I did something that went against every instinct I had. I kept quiet and waited. The opportunity came 3 weeks later. The city contract I'd been chasing finally got approved. $2 million to renovate the old municipal building downtown. It was the kind of job that would establish Carver Construction as a major player. Reed called an emergency meeting for that Friday afternoon. Dean, Marco, and I gathered in my office to discuss the project timeline. "This is it," Reed said, spreading the contract across my desk. "This is what we've been working toward." "Timeline's tight," Marco said, studying the specifications. 12 weeks from groundbreaking to completion. "We can do it," Dean added. "But we'll need to coordinate everything perfectly." I looked at the three of them. My business partner, my project manager, my best subcontractor. 3 men I trusted with my company's future. 3 men who were sleeping with my wife. "What about the financing?" I asked Reed. "Already arranged. The bank's ready to release funds as soon as we break ground." "And permits?" "Dean's got that handled," Reed said. "Right, Dean? All set. Just waiting on the final environmental clearance." I nodded and made a decision that would either save my business or destroy it. "I want to make some changes to the management structure for this project." They all looked at me. "Changes?" Reed asked. "I'm bringing in an outside project manager, someone with experience on municipal contracts." Dean's face went pale. "Nate, I can handle this. I've been managing projects for 2 years. Nothing personal, Dean. This is just too important to leave to chance." "Who are you thinking of hiring?" Reed asked, and I could hear the tension in his voice. "Tom Silva. He managed the courthouse renovation in Seattle last year." Marco whistled. "Silva's expensive." "Silva's good," I said. "And he's available." The meeting ended with handshakes and forced smiles, but I could see the panic in their eyes. They were realizing that their plan, whatever it was, had just been derailed. That evening, I made the most important phone call of my life. Silva Construction Management. "Tom, it's Nate Carver. We met at the contractors conference in Seattle." "Nate, how's business?" "Good. I've got a proposition for you." I explained the city contract and what I needed. Tom was interested, but he had conditions. "I work with my own team," he said. "No exceptions. And I handle all the financial oversight." "That's fine. I also need full access to your books, your accounts, everything. Municipal contracts are audited 6 ways from Sunday. I won't put my reputation on the line for sloppy bookkeeping." "Understood. When do you need an answer?" "Now." Tom was quiet for a moment. "You sound like a man with problems, Nate." "I'm a man with solutions." "Fair enough. I'll take the job." After I hung up, I sat in my home office and looked at the photographs spread across my desk. Pictures of Tessa with Reed, with Marco, with Dean. Evidence of betrayal that ran deeper than I'd imagined. But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was hot and unpredictable. What I felt now was cold and focused. I was going to build something beautiful out of this mess. Something that would last. The first crack in their foundation appeared on Monday morning. Tom Silva arrived at the office at 7 a.m. sharp, wearing a hard hat and carrying a briefcase full of contracts. He was exactly what I'd hoped for. Professional, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when it came to documentation. "First things first," Tom said, settling into the conference room. "I need to review all your financial records for the past 2 years. Bank statements, invoices, payroll records, everything." Reed shifted in his seat. That's a lot of paperwork, Tom. Maybe we could start with the current project and work backward. Nope, I do this my way, or I don't do it at all. Dean tried next. Some of those records are confidential. Client information, proprietary processes. Tom looked at him like he was an insect. Son, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. I know what's confidential and what's not. The question is, do you... I watched Reed and Dean exchange glances. Marco just sat there, arms crossed, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. Of course we'll provide whatever you need, I said. Reed, can you get Tom set up in the small office with access to our filing system? Sure, Reed said, but his smile looked painted on. That afternoon, Tom pulled me aside. Nate, we need to talk. Privately. We walked out to the construction site, away from the office and any listening ears. Your books are a mess, Tom said without preamble. What do you mean? I mean someone's been creative with the accounting. Invoices that don't match purchase orders. Payments to subcontractors that don't correspond to any work orders. Money moving around like it's playing musical chairs. I felt that cold feeling in my chest again. How much money? Hard to say without a full audit, but I'd estimate somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000 over the past 18 months. Jesus. There's more. Some of these phantom payments are being made to companies that don't exist, at least not in any business registry I can find. I thought about Reed's expensive suits, his BMW, the hotels where he met my wife. What do you recommend? Depends on what you want. We can clean this up quietly or we can make it official. But if you're serious about this municipal contract, you need to decide fast. The city audits everything. Clean it up quietly for now. But document everything. Tom nodded. I'll need access to all the bank accounts, and I mean all of them. Done. And Nate, watch your back. People who steal from their partners don't usually stop at money. That evening, I came home to find Tessa in an unusually good mood. She was cooking my favorite dinner, steak with garlic mashed potatoes, and had opened a bottle of wine. What's the occasion? I asked. Can a wife cook for her husband without a special occasion? I sat down at the kitchen table and watched her move around the kitchen. She was beautiful, I had to admit. Even knowing what I knew, part of me still wanted to believe this was real. How was work? She asked, setting a plate in front of me. Interesting. We hired a new project manager for the city contract. Her hand paused for just a moment as she poured wine. Really? I thought Dean was managing that. Change of plans. This guy's more experienced with municipal work. What's his name? Tom Silva. You wouldn't know him. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm sure he's very qualified. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about the weather and our weekend plans, but I could feel the tension radiating from her. She was thinking, calculating, probably texting her lovers as soon as I left the room. After dinner, I excused myself to check on some paperwork. Instead, I drove to the office and let myself in through the back door. The building was dark except for the security lights, and my footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. I went straight to Reed's office and turned on his computer. I'd learned his password months ago by watching him type it. His daughter's name and birth year, about as secure as a screen door. Reed's email told a story I'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. For the past 6 months, he'd been corresponding with a development company in Seattle about buying out my share of the business. The price they'd discussed was far below market value, and the timeline coincided perfectly with the city contract. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Reed would manufacture a financial crisis that would force me to sell. The phantom payments Tom had discovered were part of it, money being siphoned off to create the appearance of cost overruns and poor management. Dean was feeding information about our bidding process to competitors, making it harder for us to win contracts. Marco was documenting every mistake, every delay, building a case for my incompetence. And Tessa, she was the insurance policy. If I got suspicious, if I started asking questions, she'd be there to distract me, to keep me focused on our relationship instead of the business. I printed out the most incriminating emails and locked them in my desk drawer. Then I sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about loyalty and trust and the price of naivety. By the time I got home, it was after midnight. Tessa was asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I picked it up and scrolled through her recent messages. Dean, he hired some guy named Silva. You know anything about this? Tessa, no, he didn't mention it to me. Reed, Silva's going through the books. We need to accelerate the timeline. Marco, I'm out. This is getting too complicated. Reed. Nobody's out. We're too close to quit now. Tessa. What if he finds out? Dean. He won't. Nate's too trusting for his own good. I set the phone back on the nightstand and looked at my wife's sleeping face. She looked peaceful, innocent, like the woman I'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. But that woman had never existed. This was who Tessa really was. A beautiful predator who'd spotted easy prey and decided to take everything I'd built. The next morning, I made a decision that would change the rest of my life. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to fight fair. I was going to use their own tools against them, and I was going to win. I started with Dean. He was the weakest link, the one most likely to crack under pressure. I waited until he was alone in his office, then knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" I asked. "Sure, boss. What's up?" I sat down across from his desk and studied his face. He was nervous, trying to hide it behind false confidence. "I've been thinking about your career path," I said. "You've been with us for 2 years. Maybe it's time to discuss a promotion." His eyes lit up. "Really? Really? In fact, I'm thinking about making you a partner. A junior partner, but still. You'd have equity in the company, profit sharing the works." Dean leaned forward. "Nate, that's incredible. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it, because partnership means responsibility. It means complete honesty, complete loyalty. It means no secrets between us." The color drained from his face. "Of course, absolutely." "Good. Because I've learned some things lately that have made me question who I can trust." Dean's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "What? What kind of things?" "Financial irregularities, information leaks. People who aren't who they pretend to be." I stood up and walked to the door. "Think about my offer, Dean. But remember, partners tell each other everything, even the uncomfortable stuff." I left him sitting there, sweating through his expensive shirt. Next was Marco. I found him at the apartment complex project, supervising the concrete pour for the foundation. He was good at his job, I had to admit. Too bad he was better at betraying friends. "Marco, walk with me," I said. We stepped away from the noise of the construction site. Marco lit a cigarette and waited for me to speak. "I'm restructuring the company," I said. "Bringing in new management, new processes. Things are going to change." "Change how?" "More oversight, more accountability. Tom Silva is going to be auditing all our subcontractor relationships." Marco's hand paused halfway to his mouth. "Auditing how?" "Work quality, billing accuracy, personal conduct. The city contract requires it." "Personal conduct?" "You know how it is with municipal work. They check everything. Background checks, financial reviews, moral character assessments." Marco dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his boot. "What are you getting at, Nate?" "I'm getting at the fact that I know what's been going on. All of it." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Find work somewhere else. Don't contact anyone from this company again. Ever. And if I don't, then Tom Silva's audit will discover some very interesting things about your billing practices, and the city will discover some very interesting things about your relationship with my wife." Marco's face went hard. "You threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. Take it or leave it." He stared at me for another moment, then walked away without a word. I watched him go, feeling no satisfaction, no anger. Just the cold certainty that I was doing what needed to be done. That left Reed. Reed was different. He was the architect of this betrayal, the one who'd turned my business partners against me and seduced my wife. He deserved something special. I found him in his office that evening, working late on what looked like contract negotiations. He glanced up when I knocked, then gestured for me to sit down. "Nate, perfect timing. I was just reviewing the terms for the city contract." "Actually, Reed, I wanted to talk to you about something else." "Oh?" I pulled out a folder and set it on his desk. "I've been doing some research on development opportunities. There's a company in Seattle that's been buying up construction firms, aggressive pricing, quick turnarounds." Reed's face went very still. "Really?" "Yeah. Pinnacle Development Group. Ever heard of them?" "The name sounds familiar." "They should. You've been in contact with them for 6 months." Reed leaned back in his chair, and I could see him calculating his options. "Nate, I can explain." "I'm sure you can, but I'm not interested in explanations. I'm interested in solutions." "What kind of solutions?" "You're going to sell me your share of the company today. for exactly what you paid for it 2 years ago. That's insane. The company's worth 3 times what I invested. The company's worth what I say it's worth. And right now, with the accounting irregularities Tom found, with the evidence of embezzlement, with the breach of fiduciary duty, I'd say your share is worth exactly nothing. Reed stood up abruptly. You can't prove anything. I opened the folder and spread the printed emails across his desk. I can prove everything. Bank records, email communications, financial transfers. Enough to send you to prison for embezzlement and fraud. His hands shook as he picked up the papers. How did you... The same way you've been stealing from me for 6 months. By paying attention. Reed slumped back into his chair. What do you want? I want you to sign a buyout agreement. I want you to transfer your shares to me, and I want you to disappear from my life. And if I refuse, then I call the police, and the district attorney, and the state licensing board, and Pinnacle Development Group to let them know their new partner is a criminal. Reed stared at the papers for a long time. Then he reached for his pen. There's one more thing, I said as he signed. Stay away from my wife. He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something that might have been shame. Nate, about Tessa. I don't want to hear it. Just stay away from her. He nodded and finished signing the papers. I collected them, stood up, and walked toward the door. Nate, Reed called after me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I turned back to look at him. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I left him sitting there in his expensive suit, in his expensive office, signing away everything he'd tried to steal from me. But I wasn't finished. The hardest part was still ahead. I drove home to find Tessa waiting in the living room, still dressed in the business suit she'd worn to show houses that didn't exist. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the questions in her eyes. How was work? She asked. Productive. We made some personnel changes. Oh? Reed's leaving the company. Marco, too. Dean's considering his options. She was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of changes all at once. Sometimes you have to cut out the rot to save the tree. Tessa stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. Nate, is everything okay? You've been different lately. Different how? Distant, like you're angry about something. I sat down on the couch and looked at her, really looked at her. She was still beautiful, still the woman who'd made me believe in love again after my divorce. But now I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she was measuring my words, looking for weakness. I'm not angry, I said. I'm disappointed. Disappointed in what? In the people I trusted, in the choices they made, in the lies they told. She turned from the window to face me. Nate, what's going on? You're scaring me. Am I? Or are you scared because you know what's coming? Her face went pale. What do you mean? I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. I mean, I know about Dean. I know about Reed. I know about Marco. I know about all of it. Tessa's legs gave out, and she sat down heavily in the chair by the window. How long have you known? Long enough to document everything. Long enough to plan accordingly. Nate, please, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been sleeping with 3 different men? That you've been lying to me for months? That you and Reed were planning to steal my company? Tears started down her cheeks. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How is it supposed to happen? I don't know. I was confused, lonely. You were always working, always focused on the business. I felt invisible. So you decided to sleep with my employees? It wasn't about the closeness. It was about feeling wanted, feeling important. I stood up and walked to the fireplace, staring at the wedding photos on the mantel. You felt important by destroying everything I'd built? I never meant for it to go that far. Reed convinced me that the business was failing, that you were in over your head. He said he could help, that he could save the company. By stealing it? By bringing in better management, by making it profitable. I turned to look at her. And what about Dean? What about Marco? Were they saving the company too? Tessa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Dean was different. He understood me. He had ambition, plans for the future. And Marco? She looked down at her hands. Marco was a mistake. A stupid, impulsive mistake. 3 mistakes, 3 different men, 3 different lies. Nate, please. I love you. I've always loved you. No, you haven't. You loved what I could give you. The house, the security, the respectable life. But you never loved me. She stood up and walked toward me. That's not true. I married you because I loved you. You married me because I was safe. Because I was the kind of man who would take care of you, who would ask for nothing in return except loyalty. I can change. I can be the wife you deserve. I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman who'd never existed. It's too late for that, I said. What do you mean? I handed her the manila envelope. Divorce papers. I'm filing for dissolution of marriage on grounds of adultery. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. Nate, you can't do this. We can work this out. We can't work out 3 affairs. We can't work out months of lies. We can't work out the fact that you tried to steal my life's work. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. Good luck. I've documented everything. Bank records, GPS tracking, photographs, recorded conversations. Your adultery is going to be a matter of public record. You were spying on me? I was protecting myself. Something I should have done a long time ago. Tessa sank back into the chair, staring at the papers. What happens now? Now you move out. Tonight. Take your clothes and your car. Everything else stays here. This is my home too. This house is in my name. The mortgage is in my name. The down payment came from my savings. You have no legal claim to it. What about alimony? What about adultery? In this state, infidelity affects spousal support. You'll get nothing. She looked up at me with something like hatred in her eyes. You bastard. You planned this. I planned to protect myself from people who wanted to destroy me. If that makes me a bastard, so be it. I gave you 5 years of my life. You gave me 5 years of lies. There's a difference. Tessa stood up and walked toward the stairs. I need time to pack. You have 1 hour. She turned back to me. I loved you, Nate. Despite everything, despite all the mistakes, I did love you. Maybe you thought you did. But love doesn't look like what you did to me. She went upstairs, and I heard her moving around in the bedroom, opening drawers, packing suitcases. I sat on the couch and listened to her pack up 5 years of marriage. When she came back downstairs, she was carrying 2 suitcases and a garment bag. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Where will you go? I asked. I don't know. Maybe my sister's place. Tessa? She stopped at the door. What? I want you to know that I did love you, the woman I thought you were. I loved her completely. I know, she said quietly. I'm sorry I wasn't her. After she left, I sat in the empty house for a long time. The silence was complete, broken only by the tick of the clock on the mantel and the distant sound of traffic. I thought about the future, about building something new from the ruins of everything I'd trusted. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still work to do. The next morning, I met with Tom Silva to discuss the final details of the municipal contract. The audit was complete, the financial irregularities had been documented and corrected, and the city was ready to proceed. Clean books now, Tom said, setting a thick folder on my desk. All the phantom payments have been traced and recovered. Your ex-partner is going to have some explaining to do to the IRS. What about the timeline? We're good. Groundbreaking next Monday, completion in 12 weeks. I've got my crew ready to start. I nodded, feeling something like satisfaction for the first time in months. Tom, I want to ask you something. Go ahead. Why did you take this job? You could have made more money in Seattle. Tom leaned back in his chair and studied me. Because you reminded me of myself 20 years ago. Hardworking, honest, too trusting for your own good. I figured if I didn't help you, you'd end up like half the contractors I know. Broken, bitter, and broke. And now? Now I think you'll be fine. You learned the hard lessons without losing everything. That's rare. After Tom left, I spent the morning cleaning out Reed's old office. I found personal items he'd left behind. Family photos, coffee mugs, a jacket hanging on the back of his chair. I packed everything into a box and set it by the door for pickup. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found something interesting. A letter of recommendation he'd written for Dean, dated 3 weeks ago. The letterhead was from Pinnacle Development Group, so Dean had been planning to jump ship too. That explained his nervousness lately, his eagerness to please. He'd been hedging his bets, playing both sides. I called Dean into my office and showed him the letter. "Want to explain this?" I asked. Dean's face went red. "Nate, I can explain. Reed approached me about opportunities in Seattle. I wasn't seriously considering it. You weren't seriously considering a 50% salary increase and a signing bonus? How did you—" He stopped himself. Reed kept excellent records about everything. Dean slumped in his chair. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to say goodbye. You're fired." "Nate, please, I need this job. You should have thought about that before you started selling information to our competitors." "I never—" "Dean, I have the emails. I have the bank records. I have documentation of every bid you leaked, every timeline you sabotaged. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it." He sat there for a moment, then nodded. "When do you want me gone?" "Now. Security will escort you out." "What about my severance? What about your employment contract, the one that specifically prohibits corporate espionage and conflicts of interest?" Dean stood up slowly. "You know, Nate, you're not the same guy I started working for 2 years ago. You're right. 2 years ago, I was naive enough to trust people like you. And now? Now I'm smart enough to protect myself. After Dean left, I called the security company and had them change all the locks and access codes. Then I called my lawyer and had him review every contract, every agreement, every piece of paper that connected me to the people who'd betrayed me. By 5 o'clock, Carver Construction was officially mine again. No partners, no project managers with divided loyalties, no subcontractors with personal agendas. Just me, Tom Silva's crew, and a $2 million contract that would establish my company as a major player in the Portland construction market. I was locking up the office when my phone rang, Tessa's number. "Hello," I said. "Nate, we need to talk. We said everything that needed saying last night. Please, just 5 minutes. There are things you don't understand." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "You look terrible," I said, sitting down across from her. "I haven't slept. I've been thinking about everything that happened. And I realize how much I hurt you, how much I destroyed." I ordered coffee from the waitress and waited for Tessa to continue. "I want you to know that none of this was planned," she said. "I didn't set out to have affairs. I didn't set out to betray you. But you did." "Yes, I did." She looked down at her hands. "I was selfish and stupid and weak. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand that Reed manipulated all of us. He made it seem like the business was failing, like you were in over your head. He convinced me that helping him was helping you. By sleeping with him? That part was separate. That was just loneliness, I guess. You were always working, always stressed about money. Reed made me feel important. And Dean. And Marco. Dean was different. He was young and ambitious, and he made me feel young again. Marco was—" She shrugged. "Marco was a mistake, a stupid physical mistake." I sipped my coffee and studied her face. She looked sincere, remorseful. But then, she'd always been good at looking sincere. "What do you want from me, Tessa?" "I want another chance." "That's not going to happen." "Why not? People make mistakes. People change." "Because trust isn't something you can repair once it's broken. It's like concrete. Once it cracks, it never really sets right again." "So that's it? 5 years of marriage and you're just walking away?" "I'm not walking away. You walked away months ago when you decided to sleep with 3 different men." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed what we had. But I still love you. You love the security I provided. You love the lifestyle, the respectability, the social status, but you don't love me. That's not true. If it weren't true, you wouldn't have risked everything for affairs with men you barely knew." She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "What happens now? Now you rebuild your life. You find a job, find a place to live, find a way to be happy without me. And you? I focus on my business. I focus on the future. Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about that for a moment. "Maybe, someday. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation." Tessa nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm sorry, Nate, for everything. I know you are. I left her sitting there and drove home to my empty house. For the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful instead of oppressive. The municipal contract officially began the following Monday. Tom Silva's crew arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, and by noon, we were breaking ground on the biggest project of my career. The local newspaper sent a photographer, and the city council issued a press release about supporting local businesses. I stood at the edge of the construction site, watching the excavators dig the foundation, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Not just in the project, but in myself. I'd survived betrayal, rebuilt my business, and come out stronger. 6 weeks into the project, I ran into Marco at a hardware store. He was loading lumber into a beat-up pickup truck, wearing the same work clothes he'd always worn but looking somehow diminished. "Nate," he said, nodding in my direction. "Marco." We stood there for a moment, two men who had once worked side by side, now strangers. "I heard about the municipal contract," he said finally. "Congratulations." "Thanks. I also heard about Reed and Dean." "What about them?" "Reed's in legal trouble, something about tax evasion. Dean's working for a landscaping company in Vancouver." I wasn't surprised. Men who betrayed their friends rarely prospered. "Marco," I said, "why did you do it?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I could. Because she was beautiful and married and forbidden. Because I was stupid enough to think it didn't matter." "Did it matter?" "Yeah," he said quietly. "It mattered. Cost me the best job I ever had, and for what? A few afternoons with another man's wife. Any regrets? About Tessa? No. About losing your respect? Every day." Marco loaded the last of his lumber and climbed into his truck. "For what it's worth, Nate, you did the right thing. All of it." He drove away, and I never saw him again. The municipal building renovation was completed on schedule and under budget. The final inspection took place on a Friday morning in late October, with city officials, local media, and community leaders in attendance. The building looked spectacular. Original architectural details restored, modern systems installed, everything finished to museum quality. Tom Silva found me standing in the main lobby, admiring the work we'd done. "Satisfied?" he asked. "More than satisfied. This is the best work we've ever done. We make a good team. I was thinking about making this arrangement permanent." I looked at him. "You want to stay in Portland?" "I want to partner with someone I can trust. Someone who understands that reputation is everything in this business." We shook hands, and I knew I'd found something I'd lost. A business partner who shared my values, my work ethic, my commitment to excellence. The city presented us with a ceremonial key to the building and announced that Carver Construction would be considered for future municipal projects. The mayor gave a speech about supporting local businesses and investing in the community. After the ceremony, I drove through downtown Portland looking at the buildings and thinking about the future. My phone rang as I was stopped at a red light. "Nate, it's Sarah, Tessa's sister." Sarah was the only member of Tessa's family I'd liked. She was practical, honest, and had always treated me with respect. "Hi, Sarah. How are you?" "I'm fine. I'm calling about Tessa." "What about her?" "She's in trouble, Nate. Real trouble." I pulled over to the side of the road. "What kind of trouble?" "She's been living in a motel for the past month. She can't find work, can't afford an apartment. She's asked me for money, but I can't keep supporting her." "What do you want me to do about it?" "I know what she did to you. I know about the affairs, about the business problems, but she's still my sister. Sarah, I can't help her. Not financially, not emotionally. She made her choices. I understand. I hoped maybe you could talk to her. She's talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe. But I'm worried about her. She's not handling this well." After I hung up, I sat in my truck for a long time, thinking about Tessa and the choices we'd both made. Part of me felt sorry for her, the part that remembered falling in love with her, the part that had once promised to take care of her forever. But a larger part of me recognized that this was justice. Not revenge, not cruelty, just the natural consequences of betrayal and lies. I drove home to the house that was finally completely mine. 3 months later, I was reviewing plans for a new shopping center when my secretary buzzed the intercom. "Nate, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." "Who is it?" Reed Hoffman. I was quiet for a moment, then told her to send him in. Reed looked like a different man. His expensive suits had been replaced by off-the-rack clothes. His BMW had been replaced by a 10-year-old sedan. His confident swagger had been replaced by nervous energy. Hello, Nate. Reed, I heard you were having legal problems. The IRS has questions about some business expenses. Nothing I can't handle. I'm sure. He sat down across from my desk without being invited. I came to apologize. Apologize for what, specifically? For the embezzlement, for the business with Pinnacle Development. For Tessa. In that order, Reed's face flushed. I know you have every right to hate me. I don't hate you, Reed. Hatred requires passion, and I don't feel passionate about you anymore. Then what do you feel? Nothing. You're irrelevant to my life now. Reed was quiet for a moment. I lost everything, you know. My marriage, my business, my reputation. The IRS seized my house, my cars, my bank accounts. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Really? I considered the question. No, I'm not sorry. You earned every bit of what happened to you. And you feel no responsibility for it? For your choices? No. For protecting myself from those choices. Absolutely. Reed stood up and walked to the window. I used to think you were naive, Nate. Too trusting, too simple. Turns out you were just patient. I was naive, but I learned. What did you learn? That trust has to be earned. That loyalty has to be reciprocated. That some people will take everything you have if you let them. Reed turned back to me. What about forgiveness? What about it? Don't you believe in second chances? I believe in consequences. You had chances, months of chances to come clean, to do the right thing. You chose to lie, to steal, to betray. These are the consequences. And Tessa? What about her consequences? What about them? She's living in a trailer park in Gresham, working at a grocery store for minimum wage, driving a car that barely runs. How do you know all that? I drove by there last week, saw her coming out of the store in a uniform, he shrugged, looking broken. Why were you in Gresham? Looking for work. Apparently, word gets around in the construction business. No one wants to hire someone who embezzled from their partner. I leaned back in my chair and studied Reed's face. What do you want from me? I want you to know that I'm sorry, that I know what I did was wrong, that I wish I could take it all back. But you can't. No, I can't. Then we're done here. Reed nodded and walked toward the door. Nate? What? For what it's worth, you were a good partner. Better than I deserved. Yeah, I said. I was. After Reed left, I sat in my office thinking about the conversation. There had been a time when his apology might have meant something to me, when I might have felt some satisfaction in his downfall. But now, I felt nothing. Reed Hoffman was a chapter in my life that had ended, a problem that had been solved. His current troubles were his own responsibility, just as my current success was mine. That evening, I drove past the trailer park in Gresham. I told myself I was just curious, just wanted to see how the other half lived. But the truth was more complicated. I found Tessa's trailer in the back row, a single wide with peeling paint and a small car that looked like it had seen better days. There was a light on in the window, and I could see her moving around inside. She looked older, thinner, tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. This was a woman who'd lost everything she thought mattered, her beauty, her status, her security. I sat in my truck for 15 minutes, watching her through the window, thinking about the woman I'd married and the woman she'd become. When she moved toward the window, I started the engine and drove away. I never went back. The shopping center project was completed 6 months later, and Carver Silva Construction was awarded 3 more municipal contracts. Tom and I had built something solid, something lasting. We employed 43 people, owned our own equipment, and had a reputation for quality work delivered on time and under budget. I bought a new house in the hills overlooking the city, with a view of the river and mountains beyond. It was larger than I needed, more expensive than I'd ever imagined owning, but it felt like home in a way my old house never had. On a Saturday morning in June, almost 2 years after my divorce was finalized, I was reviewing plans for a new apartment complex when my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Tessa standing on my porch. She looked even more worn than she had through the trailer window. Her hair was shorter, streaked with premature gray. Her clothes were clean but cheap. Her car in the driveway was the same beat-up sedan I'd seen at the trailer park. Hello, Nate. Tessa. What are you doing here? I need to talk to you. About what? About us, about what happened, about what I did. I stepped aside and let her in, more out of curiosity than courtesy. She looked around the living room with something like wonder. This is beautiful, she said. Thank you. You always said you'd build us a house like this someday. I built it for me, not for us. She flinched, but nodded. Can we sit down? We sat on opposite ends of the couch, careful not to touch, careful to maintain distance. I know you don't want to see me, she said. I know you don't owe me anything. But I need to say some things. Go ahead. I've been thinking about what happened, about the choices I made. I've had a lot of time to think. And I realized that I never really understood what I had with you. I took it for granted, took you for granted. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that I know. I know what I threw away. I know what I destroyed. Okay? I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I just want you to know that I understand now. I studied her face, looking for deception, for manipulation, for the calculation I'd learned to recognize, but all I saw was exhaustion and regret. What do you understand? That love isn't about excitement or passion or feeling wanted. It's about trust and loyalty and building something together. It's about choosing the same person every day, even when it's hard. It took you 2 years to figure that out? It took me losing everything to figure that out. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear birds singing and the distant sound of traffic. How are you doing? I asked finally. I'm surviving. I have a job, a place to live. It's not much, but it's honest. That's something. I heard about your success. The business, this house, your reputation. I'm happy for you. Are you? Yes. You deserve better than what I gave you. You deserve better than me. You weren't always like this, Tessa. When we met, you were different. No, I wasn't. I was just better at hiding it. The selfishness, the entitlement, the need to be the center of attention. It was always there. What changed? Losing everything. Realizing that all the things I thought mattered, money, status, excitement, don't mean anything if you don't have someone who loves you. And now I'm learning to be someone worth loving. It's harder than I thought it would be. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never seen before. Humility, self-awareness, the beginning of wisdom. I should go, she said, standing up. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did to you, what I did to us. I walked her to the door. Tessa? Yes. I hope you find what you're looking for. I already did. I just found it too late. She got in her car and drove away, and I knew I'd never see her again. I stood on my porch for a long time after she left, thinking about love and loss and the price of betrayal. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was beautiful, peaceful, complete. For the first time in 3 years, I felt whole. The next morning, I was at the office early, reviewing bids for a new hospital project. Tom arrived at 7, carrying coffee and blueprints. Big day, he said, spreading the plans across the conference table. The biggest yet. $200 million project, 18-month timeline. Think we can handle it? I know we can handle it. Tom smiled. You sound different lately, more confident. I feel different. Like I finally understand who I am and what I want, which is to build things that last, to work with people I trust, to create something worthwhile. Simple goals. The best ones usually are. We spent the morning reviewing the hospital plans, discussing timelines and resource allocation. It was good work, honest work, the kind of project that would make a difference in people's lives. At lunch, I drove to the municipal building we'd renovated 2 years earlier. It was bustling with activity, city employees, citizens conducting business, tour groups admiring the architecture. Our work had become part of the community, a lasting contribution to the city's infrastructure. I thought about Reed, about Dean, about Marco. They'd all been talented men, capable of good work, but they'd chosen shortcuts and betrayals over honesty and effort. Now they were footnotes in other people's stories, cautionary tales about the price of disloyalty. I thought about Tessa, driving home to her trailer in that beat-up car. She'd finally learned the lessons she should have learned 20 years ago, but it was too late to save our marriage. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had been replaced by something better, clarity. I knew who I was, what I valued, what I wanted from life. I knew the difference between people who built things and people who tore them down. I drove back to the office and found Tom waiting with the hospital contract. We signed it together, two men who'd found in each other the partnership we'd both been looking for. To the future, Tom said, raising his coffee cup. To building things that last, I replied. We shook hands, and I knew we were going to build something extraordinary together. Not just buildings, but a legacy. Not just a business, but a reputation that would outlast us both. That evening, I stood on the construction site where it all began, where I'd first learned that the people closest to you could be the ones most willing to destroy you. The old building had been demolished, replaced by a shopping center that was already thriving. Progress, growth, renewal. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about the hospital contract. Congratulations, you earned it. Marco. Still keeping track of my success, still carrying the weight of his betrayal. I deleted the message without responding. As I drove home to my house in the hills, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also taught me lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. It had shown me the difference between allies and enemies, between love and manipulation, between building and destroying. I pulled into my driveway and looked up at the house I'd built with honest money earned through honest work. Inside, blueprints for future projects covered my desk. Outside, the city spread below me like a promise of things to come. I'd lost a wife, 3 employees, and a business partner. But I'd gained something more valuable, the knowledge that I could survive anything, rebuild from nothing, and create something beautiful from the ruins of betrayal. Some foundations crack under pressure, others become stronger. I chose to become stronger.